We are live. Hello once again. Welcome to C9K, where we talk containers, Kubernetes, cybersecurity, following trends, WTFs, where the big money is. My name is Steve Jaguar.
And I'm his co-host, Mike Foster. We have OpenTofu, some big spenders, a little bit of breaking news, and a cool Winglang demo from Steve at the end of the show. Thanks for joining. Yes, we're back and we're bringing you a packed show for the day. Some breaking news, which I'm pretty interesting. Steve's going to get into it. Hot take from yours truly. And as always, all the links are below in the description. Hit the little subscribe button so you know when we go live, typically every 2 weeks, so we can give you a packed hour. Steve, where you been? What have you been doing since we last talked?
I went to Sardinia, which is Italy, for those of you who don't know geography, and played in a ultimate frisbee tournament. 26 degrees, beautiful sun, sea, sand. Can't complain about that. Otherwise, I have spent this month rushing out another AWS Jam Capture the Flag. So if you're coming to reinvent and you're going to do the AWS Jam, which I think is highly useful if you want to learn AWS in any fashion with a proper hands-on and fun and games and kind of a leaderboard, definitely do that. I'll see you there.
And we'll both see you at KubeCon if you're going to Chicago second week in November. That will be hopefully not super cold and a ton of fun, but looking forward to that. We'll have a KubeCon before and after show. I'm sure that you're going to give us a reInvent wrap-up as well, Steve. But yeah, it's going to be a packed event season coming up. Let's get into the news. Yes, first news of the day, some product announcements coming from CloudBees.
Where we go. Whoa. This confused me, right? You added this one, I think. CloudBees announces a new cloud-native DevSecOps platform. I don't understand, because I don't know, for those of you who are probably way more familiar with Jenkins, that's CloudBees. Mm-hmm. And they have Jenkins X, they have Jenkins Enterprise, they have, as far as I can tell, they have one of these already. What is this?
So it's using Tekton underneath the hood, which I think is really interesting. They pulled the open source Tekton, and I think that this is less about Jenkins and more about pulling people who don't use Jenkins and saying, hey, you don't need to move back to Jenkins, but we have the alternative that you use that just maps completely over to our product. That's my theory.
I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. It's a great business decision.
Did you see where the sec fits?
I mean, I'm assuming Tekton has some like policies built in, like maybe you can stop certain things, but yeah, I don't know. This is more of a marketing term now at this point.
That's true. Yeah, we found it. So there you go. It worked.
Yeah, pretty spot on. Along with that, we've been talking about Terraform and the business source license that they came out with, and now Linux has responded in kind with OpenTofu. Steve, have you seen this?
I don't think it's so kind. Very unkind. Linux Foundation, OpenTofu. Yeah, it was OpenTF like last week.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know why they went with tofu. I had Taylor Dolezal on the clouds with my boss, Stu Miniman, and he gave a breakdown that the hope is that while HashiCorp goes off and continues to work on their product, that eventually the two open source and business sourced licenses will meet up in the future, that they're keeping this fork alive in hopes that, things may change, and also to support the greater open source arena. Now, I always wonder, is this purely community driven from Linux, or is this also a business decision from other vendors that are saying, hey, Linux, keep this alive here. We're going to sponsor you a couple events. Let's make sure that this project doesn't falter, even though only 4% of contributions were from outside sources.
Yeah, bit of both, let's say.
Yeah, cynic hat, optimist hat. Yeah, we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, there's benefits for all, maybe with the exception of HashiCorp.
Yeah, tofu is an interesting language choice, though. I think Taylor said tofu goes good with anything. You can have it spicy, you can have it cold. So it's like that was the analogy. It's pretty funny. Taylor's good with puns. Yeah, so look forward to that. If you're a Terraform enthusiast, it's still gonna be hanging around. You don't need to go and buy a license from HashiCorp, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Tofu also very polarizing. So
yeah, that is true. Yeah. An alternative to the meat, is that another one?
Yeah,
Terraform.
It keeps going.
All right. Next one, NIST. Linux Foundation.
I like these things. The NIST Zero Trust Architecture Model for Access Control in Cloud Native Applications and Multi-Location Environments. These are kind of cool because I don't know if you ever get this, because seeing as we work in cybersecurity things, every now and then I've got friends who aren't in cybersecurity. They are, but they aren't. They're like, they work in ops or they work in IT, and it turns out their company doesn't really have a solid cybersecurity, and so suddenly they have to do something, and or create a standard or follow some kind of framework. And NIST does a great job generally of producing frameworks that you can get started with, so that you don't sound like a complete moron if you're trying to implement cyber in an organization. And this is another pretty good example of the NIST SP 800 blah 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 series that you can go whip through. Not that long, a lot of credits and diagrams and stuff, but blast through. Do what we always do: jump straight to the table of contents and see that, okay, like they're explaining what zero trust is, who's the target audience, and then you get into the meat down here in section 4. So pretty good, I think. I don't need this, but I think it's really good to make people aware that if you're getting into this, this is a good start.
Yeah, what do you think kicks off a lot of these NIST initiatives? Is it funding?
Oh God, I don't know.
Because this one's geared around service mesh specifically, because that's really the only way you can get zero trust in a cloud native environment, is to monitor each application, make sure you have certification, MTLS, things like that. So it really is heavy on the service mesh. I'm just wondering, how these things get created. If, for example, you're a service mesh company, it's advantageous for you to have something like this, because then customers are like, hey, we need to follow this compliance standard. Let's follow NIST. That means we need a service mesh. Let's go pay this company. They have videos on how to enforce the standard, right? So I'm just always wondering how this circle gets started, because as soon as a NIST guidance comes out, it's going to pop up in conversations with the customers, whether or not they need it. It's going to come up.
And you just watch the space, because there'll be a vendor that says, and we will keep you SP 800 207A compliant. And they're like, wait a second, this thing came out yesterday. How were you so quick on the mark? So it's probably a combination of things, like you're saying. There's probably a vendor who backed it with some engineering and some read-throughs to make sure it was on point. Probably the government, because the government's generally involved in things like this, saying, we've got SBOMs now, we need zero trust. How do we do that? And NIST is on top of it. So combination of factors, typically in America produced things.
Yeah, that circle is, you can always like swap policies to make it seem like you're compliant, but the workflow might not necessarily be there, right? Like in a compliance dashboard. Anyways, I'm getting into the weeds a little bit, but
like the way you're thinking.
Yeah.
I look compliant.
I need to pass an audit.
Yeah.
I think this is on the last one before the hot take. You put this.
Yeah, I like this. Yeah, I like Project Discovery at the moment. They're coming up a lot. Democratizing cybersecurity in the United States of America. OpenRisk. OpenRisk works in tandem by ingesting the output from, and we talked about this recently, this is Nuclei, very hot right now in terms of determining vulnerabilities from the outside in. And our internal research team and pen testers love Nuclei, creating rules and analyzing. Essentially, it's a little bit like a Zap, OWASP Zap kind of thing, but apparently a lot smarter. And then this takes it, and you can see there's an OpenAI connection. What a surprise. That feed takes this output and actually gives you a proper risk score, as opposed to just, here's a list of things we found. This is trying to take that and give you some better context on it. So I thought, all right,
I did.
Pretty cool.
I went to the examples folder and it shows you an output, and it actually will go through all of your files and be like, this is an example of cross site scripting issue. So if you go into the scan.txt file there,
Yep.
And you scroll down, not only does it actually say that there's risk, it will say, it reflected, cross scripting attack, medium, blah, blah, blah. Here's the URL example. And I think that it's one thing to have an AI generate a risk, but it's also another thing to tell you why it's giving a risk score there. So there must be some sort of like nuclei must be taking all of the feedback that it gets from ChatGPT and assigning it a number in order to do some sort of algorithm of risk, right? Because you're not trusting the AI just to come up with a risk score. So there must be like a, AI's bubbling all this stuff up, and then they're doing some sort of number calculation in the background to get a risk. So pretty cool.
Yeah, it's the nuclei stuff. I don't know what that output looks like. Maybe this would be a good tool time, but probably a pretty complicated one for us.
I'll try to do it for 2 weeks from now. The last time that I said I would do a brand new project, it didn't necessarily work out. But tune in 2 weeks if you want to see nuclei. I will
leave it with me. Well, I'll ask one of our researchers internally if he's good enough with it, and get him as a guest. That might be safer.
Yeah,
either way, we'll try.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. All right, we are on to the hot take. Are you ready? Extra spicy today. Ooh, extra spicy today. Analyst firms are grifty. It's kind of a grift. I'm not saying analysts. I'm not saying some of the research papers. I think a lot of the information that's gathered is very, very useful for business. That doesn't mean that, maybe 10%, 20% of the business can't be a grift. And there was a article that came across my desk, and it was Checkpoint named leader in Forrester Wave Zero Trust platform providers. And zero trust wasn't a term until 3 years ago. So now all of a sudden things become a marketing term. We have to create a new paper on it. We go to the different vendors that say that they are zero trust, and then we evaluate them. It's very interesting how, even though there might be like 4 analyst firms, maybe 3 that are well respected, there's 10 in the world, they somewhat come to different conclusions sometimes, where one will say it's zero trust, but then the second best says it's a different provider, and then the third best says it's another different provider. I understand that it's gathering this information, but it almost feels like they're creating the paper so that company can then use it to market, right? So there's a little bit of inconsistency in the way things are evaluated that sort of grinds my gears. The other thing is just the sheer number of, let's say, waves or radars or things like that are out there. It's exhausting. And you go in, and the third slide of every product's like, we were ranked number 1, we were ranked number 2, we were ranked number 3. It's a great bullet point to say that you're externally validated, but it's almost getting to the point where it doesn't mean much to me. I don't know. It's sort of getting watered down now. It's like, okay, well, you just provided a bunch of information to an external analyst in a very biased way, and then they read it, and I guess their job is to cut through all the BS. You just hope that it's going well. Anyways, the third thing is some of these radars, their job is to go and gather a lot of information from various different inputs. You're trusting the technical teams to go and tell you, hey, yes, our product does X, but they're not going in and actually validating that the product does X. They're just reading a document, and you're giving maybe a couple of links and sublinks to do it. Some of these radars are very thorough. You got to wonder how much they're going in depth. I'd be very curious. I would love to have an analyst on to talk about all the work they do, because it seems like it would be exhausting to do some of these radars. So that's my hot take. It feels grifty. Sometimes it feels like you're taking advantage of a situation to prop up a name, but not prop up another name, and vice versa. And then some of these marketing terms are coming out of nowhere, and it's a little interesting to me. All right, hot take over.
And Michael's been fired.
Listen, they're a business at the end of the day. I think a lot of the research is great, and the analysts themselves do a lot of work. I'm just saying that sometimes there are these new things that pop up, and you're like, is this needed? Is this useful?
Yep. A magic quadrant. Yeah, I hear you. It's wild how I think that was interesting what you said is that they assess the vendor, but are they getting the product and they going in and testing it and going, or they just look at the list? Do you do all these things? Yeah, we do.
Like
Yeah,
there are certain reviews where it's high level. It's like, here are all the vendors in the space and here's how they rank themselves. And here's sort of like where they are in the market based off of revenue streams. It's like, okay, kind of see who the leaders are, who people are buying the most of, who has a good sales team. Cool. Informational.
Yeah.
But to say like somebody is the leader in zero trust platform provider, and it's like, okay, that's just based off features and feedback, right?
Well, that leads us very nicely into our first WTF.
Yes. A Reddit thread, surprisingly, that popped up. You found this one.
Oh, yeah. Well, I didn't find it. Our internal team that monitors anytime that we or anybody in our competition gets mentioned on Reddit, it goes off internally. And so it got a good look through there. And I love the question. What vendor looks really good, but it's actually terrible? Gee, I wonder if Checkpoint's in here. Anyway, everyone's going to be in here, right? You know that. Had some great demos fall apart on first contact if the environment users, and then it gets into, I won't name names right now. People hate BitSite. I never even heard of them. They get mentioned a lot.
Provide what they think is a risk score. That is interesting.
Security scorecard. See, that's so, you got to be really careful. This is why people are high risk. When they say we're going to give you a risk score, it's like, ugh. People then went, what did you do? How did you create it? And if it's bad. I like this one, shame as a service.
Yeah.
It's rough. A lot of people, lot of people backing that one up. Secure Onyx, McAfee. It's like hot garbage. Wow. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in here.
Yeah.
You guys didn't get a mention, but you guys are like, Red Hat has a great security product built in. Palo Alto definitely gets a mention in here. Kaseya gets a lot of mentions.
Not infosec, but Workday.
Somewhere.
Yeah, Darktrace.
Workday. Why? Who's mentioning Workday? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like everybody's had a bad situation with an individual product, right? Like some things just didn't go as planned. I thought what was like Sneak got mentioned, but not for the product, but for the sales team. And that's something that I've heard on the side of like, sales over promises. They push on the product, they guarantee certain things, and then you get in the product and it's completely warped your perception of what it can do, right?
Yeah.
And like, is that the product's fault? Like engineering would hate that feedback. It's like the product's fine.
It's all right. I don't think anybody really got slated too bad, other than those ones right at the beginning where everyone had really jumped on that bandwagon. So a few I'd never even heard of. Like, why are you saying Outlook 365? Yeah, it's totally insecure. But not too bad. There was an interesting one here that I think is a bit of foreshadowing for us when we get to the big spenders, is any Cisco security product. And then immediately afterward, Splunk's future is looking fantastic. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. And we have some breaking news too, I think we're going to show, right, Steve?
Yep.
One that you can't find in the notes below. All right. And then this one is a little warning to the AI researchers. It's pretty bad.
It's just flash trip stupid.
Yeah. Yikes.
38 terabytes of data accidentally exposed by AI researchers. This is a great lesson in internal security, I suppose, right? Like correct me if I'm wrong, right? They meant to upload downloadable models and then somehow uploaded
backups of their own workstation.
Backups of their own workstations. Yeah. What the hell?
Yeah. That's
okay.
It's an oopsie.
I like this one. That's like, I like that this diagram is great. A small sample of sensitive files found on computer backups. Chat. How's it going? Hey, doing well. Redacted, 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 redacted. What's it say there? Hey, you got that dick pic?
Oh my gosh. I would be mortified if I did something like that. Not because there's anything salacious, but more just that I would get crucified by my buddies for the rest of my life over dumb messages, right? Like,
oh my God.
You're never going to win an argument for this. You're like, your buddy's going to be like, yeah, we have your whole chat history, buddy.
Yeah, so does the world.
Yeah.
And Anyway, almost useless diagram where it goes on to explain how not to do this yourself for a while.
Yeah,
But
I hope that Gretel AI is taking a snapshot of this and posting it, because this is the perfect example of like why synthetic data is needed. You don't have to worry about these buckets. You just put it in the platform and make sure that you're not the one uploading it, that you're only uploading what gets cleaned and processed out, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, right. Like it does question. It makes me like wonder. You said, how did this happen? Why are employee disk backups anywhere near open source AI data that could happen? Woo! Oh, it's all in a big. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this is one of the reasons for the call to go back to work. One, because of the real estate portfolio, it's commercial, but the other one is it's very, very hard to govern people's devices when they're at home. You got to have a very, very thorough cybersecurity strategy.
Oh yeah, that's true. No argument there. All right.
Yeah, and
we got a lot of WTFs today.
Yeah, this next one came across my desk just because it was yes. Like it's pretty yeah, of course. I think when they say burnout's nice buzzword. Obviously, that's been used in the last couple of years. Really, what security is saying is it's shifting needs based off of businesses not knowing what they need in security teams having to rush to put out fires that maybe they had brought up 6 months ago and got no attention on, right? I think the number one, say, security teams want to be seen. They want to know that they can, when they say this is an issue, that it actually gets acted on, and then they don't want to be putting out the fires and spending whole weeks dealing with a vulnerability when they don't get listened to, right? So I think this is just one of those WTF/duh articles.
Yeah. 77% say stress levels at work directly affect their ability to keep customer data safe. I believe all of this.
Yep.
It's WTF, but it's like, yeah, of course. Some of the numbers are kind of crazy, but it really does not, like, given the number of often advertised open recs in cybersecurity, articles like this, I don't think have people clamoring to get involved.
I think security products play a role in this too. If you're selling fear in your security product, like, look at all these vulnerabilities, these are bad, this is what's going on. Yeah, security teams are going to have to respond to all of them. And if you don't have a articulate and knowledgeable CISO or security lead, they're going to have you chasing down ghosts a lot of the time. And that creates burnout. All of a sudden, I'm going to stop looking at those notifications, especially if it's something I've ignored in the past, right?
Kind of goes back to what I said about the NIST thing, because I know several people who weren't security people that were just said, hey, you do security. And it's like, so the frameworks are good, but yeah, burnout is shortly around the corner because there's a lot going on.
And then we have two more. Okay. Beware of MFA, multi-factor authentication.
This is pretty cool, this article, because if you check it out, I think it's from mid-September. Yeah, talking about back in August, Retool were a subject to a hack, a social engineering style hack on themselves. So this is a autobiographical article, not just somebody's complaining about MFA. So it's quite interesting to read through. They do have a real good stab at Google's multi-factor authentication backup to the cloud, because their ability to, in a way, kind of man in the middle, spearfish one of their employees to click on what looked like an Okta link, and then get them involved in a multi-factor authentication exchange where they could talk to them and say, all right, now you do the multi-factor, and then they're multi-factoring remotely. Therefore, now they add their own device into their own multi-factor. And because of the backup, suddenly they have access to all multi-factor authentication. So it's like, oops.
Yeah.
And that seems pretty bad. I hadn't seen, they do make a reference to a Hacker News set of notes where people, when this first came out, with people like bantering back and forth, like on Reddit going, this sounds bad.
Yep. Yeah. So two things that were interesting. We had talked about Google's change, and I think it came earlier this year. I want to say it was June, July. It was on a previous show. And I said it makes it a lot easier because when you switch devices now, but the biggest complaint is you had all your multi-factor authentication on a device. When you switch devices, they don't carry over because there's no transfer and you have to go re-authenticate everything. People got pissed. So they enabled this so that when they switch their Android phones, all their MFA keys move over with them, right? The downside of this is now they're stored in the cloud. So it means that somebody can go and put their device up there. Now, like things like 1Password, LastPassword have this ability. I have always never used multi-factor in 1Password. I do not want my passwords and the one-time codes in the same spot for that reason, right? So it is sort of this trade-off of like, yeah, you want the ease of being able to transfer over to your new device, but it creates a security loophole. The one thing that Google has done that they didn't enable and they didn't talk about in this is that I have things like that are tracked by IP. So as soon as somebody logs on to my Google account and an IP that's not recognized, it should block them / I should get a notification, pretty much, that somebody else is signing in. Also, if somebody else adds a device, I get a notification for that as well. So the fact that this person should be getting notifications that somebody else is signing into their account. So there are other ways that you can sort of mitigate against this. But the number one thing is just don't share one-time codes with anybody ever.
No, that's
nobody should ever need to know that.
He said he was getting suspicious, but shared it anyway in the article. It's like, okay, yeah. And LastPass does the same thing. In fact, LastPass makes it hard for me to log into my own stuff because they kick you out so often. It's like, and I've got a VPN that rotates me through IP addresses so often that I'm always logged off everything. It's like, but secure.
Yeah, that's the hope. And that's crazy because it's going to be social engineering that gets past MFAs. And it is very good. They say they use an AI voice, mimicked a coworker, had knowledge of the building. It's very creepy that somebody did that. So
I kind of admire the effort that went in there.
Yeah, a lot of commitment.
Yeah. All right, Sony.
Reportedly
facing another ransomware attack. The PlayStation Network may get affected. Did I add this or do you add this?
I think I added it. It's mostly just a ransomware attack. This is nothing crazy. I'm just more curious to see. It says successfully breached Sony systems. Is this just a hack? Are they exfiltrating data? Or what exactly happened? When these articles come out with not a lot of information. I was curious.
Yeah, I got that too. So they say a newcomer to the ransomware scene, but an attacker who, and we talked about this before. If you have a successful ransomware deployment, thus you get known for it, you have the ability now to tell a major organization that we have compromised your systems, we have ransomware paths, by doing nothing.
Yep.
Because
you leak it to some sketchy blog and you say, hey, we have this information. They write about it. There's no backup. There's no validation. There's no, I didn't see anything from Sony.
Right. So it's like, I think as you get through the article, they're like, we're not entirely sure we got breached here. So who knows? It could be one of those. It might not be one of those. But I don't know if you're a PlayStation player. I don't know.
Well, yeah, we're getting into the news where there's definitely one of those. The next article is the MGN one.
Oh, well, yeah. The Caesars. I mean, everyone.
Caesars,
It's this time it's Caesars. I mean, last week we talked about MGM being shut down. And when this article came out, they mentioned further down that MGM is still using stone tools and bearskin to get people checked in. So it's like what the hell. And now Caesars said customer data stolen in cyberattack. Doesn't sound as bad. Huge trove of customer data. I always find it weird, right? Which includes social security numbers and driver's licenses.
Yeah.
When have I submitted anything that looks anywhere near that to a casino or a hotel? No one's got my driver's license. Where's this data coming from?
I wonder if it has to do with the tax filings in the US, because in the US you get taxed on your winnings. And so that means that if I win $1 million at Caesars and then I don't report it, maybe the government talks to Caesars and says, like, did this person win a certain amount? Like, oh yeah, do they have to file taxes based off the individual that comes in and wins a ton of money?
Oh yeah. Well, okay.
I'm wondering. But yeah, I don't know. It's crazy. It could also be employees, and the person that wrote the article just mixed up employee information with customer data and lumped it all together. But
I don't know. I mean, the interesting thing here, they do mention the MGM, is that it says Caesars paid about half, whatever that means, of the $30 million demanded by the hackers to prevent disclosure of the stolen data. I'm like, okay, like normally you would say we never negotiate with terrorists or whatever. We're not going to pay the money. Except this is Caesar's. That's like you stealing my data and asking me for 50 cents. 30, like 50. No, that's nothing. They made that like while we've been talking, they've made that.
It's not Ocean's 13 anymore. It's just hackers online. Like the casinos have spent so much money setting up their machines to be unhackable. You can't rob a casino. You can't do all these things. But then, no, you can rob a casino, just in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. Just find a way to hack in and then say, give us money.
Yeah, modern day Ocean's 13. I need Brad Pitt in the hacking movie coming up soon.
All right. If you're watching this, he's a fan. We know that.
Exactly. All right, let's spend some money. All right.
Yeah, Cisco to acquire Splunk to help make organizations more secure and resilient in an AI-powered world. That's nice.
Part of the Reddit thread discussed how Splunk is considered a SIM tool, security information event management system.
Yeah, it is.
It is
probably the most famous one.
Yeah, is it really just like a log aggregator?
Well, it's got a lot of ways to tailor. It's got a lot of out-of-the-box formulas to get data out of it. It's not like Grafana where you're like, good luck.
Yeah. Security incidents and event, because it takes you through security incidences with all the logs and stuff like that, but there's no real enforcement or anything like that. It's more for auditing, looking through the data, making a decision afterwards, right? About how you're going to fix the problem.
Yeah. If everything's gone to crap, you're relying on an actual security tool to keep you safe, lock you down, put virtual patches, change your WAF, do all that. And then this is your forensics, right?
Gotcha. 157 per share in cash, representing approximately 28 billion in equity value.
It's incredible. And somebody said rip Splunk in that Reddit article, and I think Splunk fits into Cisco perfect. Yeah, like, that's a hot take.
Yeah, I think they're going to need an AI approach in the future. There's just too much data coming in now. It's going to be interesting to see where the product goes. It'll spend the next year. Cisco will spend the next year trying to sell into their customers. There'll be a whole migration. Maybe that sales team might be gone. The usual stuff. But
sales team, they're gone.
Yeah, there's on a somewhat separate topic. There's an interesting duality between the people who say that, the people who don't. Some people like change. Some people want to use bleeding edge in technology, and I find that they coincide with that opinion. It's like RIP Splunk. It's like it's probably actually going to be more stable and sold into bigger businesses now.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, that's going to happen, and people who are already buying a Cisco security product, and as much as we can heckle it, a lot of people do. They sell hardware. They're not a million miles off many competitors. Cisco are not an unsuccessful company.
No, that's the thing. Like, yeah, you might have had some bad run-ins with the Cisco, sales team or the way they do licenses or something like that. But this actually happens in gaming too, right? Where the marketing and the licensing and all the trying to make money get in the way of the product, right? But the product itself is solid. So, all right, now on to the second big spender. CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike's been in the news a lot lately.
Yeah. CrowdStrike to acquire. Now we bring this up earlier as a rumor a while back. CrowdStrike was rumored to acquire security startup Bionic for $350 million, which is interesting because I think in an earlier Reddit thread, somebody was complaining about how CrowdStrike, or no, maybe actually in that thread, there's somebody talking about how CrowdStrike's pretty good, but they don't have anything truly in the cloud native security runtime space. And it was like, 2 hours later, there's somebody going, I think they solved it. So
yeah, I think this is good for the portfolio because they've recently made a pivot into Kubernetes containers and like the enforcement in the cloud. And then now they're going into the application space. So I think they're trying to build that whole platform security vision where, you code it, we do the scans locally, we check it in, application scanning paired with, the cloud configuration, the Kubernetes configuration data. It makes sense from a story perspective. How it's going to play out, anybody knows.
Yeah, I think I find it particularly fascinating because I've spoken to a lot of people, maybe even a year ago now, I don't know, it feels like a while back, who were heavily involved in Bionic early on. And I was like, looks cool because ASPM was coming up, right? So Puro came out of nowhere. We can even include a little bit of cider and backslash. Like ASPM's become more of a phrase.
Mm-hmm.
And in speaking with Bionic, I'm like, okay, this sounds really cool. Like, where are you going? Looking for an exit? Ask the usual questions you never expect to get an answer to. And they were like, we love HashiCorp. We're going all the way. All the way. This is our baby. I'm like, yeah, everybody's got a price. Like, I think this conversation happened this year.
Interesting.
Now we know what it is.
Yeah, now we do know. All right. I think we have some breaking news. Steve, you ready?
Yeah, I am ready. I think I have to find.
So much breaking news. I'm putting Steve on the spot to pull the article up. He sent it to me this morning.
Got it. Boom.
He's got it. He's ready to go. All right.
Palo Alto. I've heard of them. Palo Alto Networks in advanced talks to buy Talon and Dig. Talon, never heard of them. Talon Cybersecurity developed an enterprise browser aimed at security distributed workforces. Did we talk about, because we definitely talked about a security enterprise browser in a previous show. Was it Talon?
There was Talon and there was another one. I'm blanking on the name, but yes, in a previous show, we discussed how in a distributed workforce, in a workforce that is more remote, you need to secure the browser. So, I can have Chrome, I can have all these extensions. These extensions are pulling from the documents that I'm reading. If I open up Google Drive and I have some sort of AI, it can see the document. It could theoretically pull it. You don't have control over that. And so by having a browser that limits certain extensions and certain things for certain users, you cut down on that. I can say, I know what you're searching. I know what you're doing. I can block certain things, especially in a remote environment. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Dig security.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I know that.
Okay. What's the breakdown?
Securing data across public clouds. We don't actually, I say we as in Palo Alto, because full disclosure, that's where I work, right? We don't have a thing that does this. I mean, it's funny. When you think about all the different facets within Palo Alto, they must just sit around on a whiteboard going, what do we not do? Gotta be something, right? And then, data, like pure data security and rest in motion, all this, just data. We don't have a built-in solution that does this. There are probably elements of it within some of the non-Prisma Cloud areas within Palo Alto, but it probably got into the build is costing too much. What does it cost to buy, right? That decision is taken very seriously internally. And I guess they went, let's get this. This looks good. It's amazing how many companies they like internally get looked at before a company even gets like put on the table. It's like, it's crazy. The acquisitions here are probably the same, like at Red Hat, right? It's an insane, like there's so many people behind it. It's so complicated. I would love to be involved because I love those discussions. But it's cool. I think rarely do you see Palo Alto buy something and it not feel like a good fit. So,
there were some interesting investors too. I believe Orca and Lacework were investors in Dig.
Another reason to buy them.
Yeah. And like you said, like there's sort of this play of, okay, well, I think I'm going to need this in 3 years. I'm going to invest in this startup. And if I can't buy it out at a lower price because I've invested early, then my competitor might buy it and I'm making a ton of money that I can go and invest and maybe buy another product. So there's this whole...
Well, Wiz was an early investor in Bionic and they just got bought by CrowdStrike.
Yep.
Which Wiz will consider to be a competitor now. So interesting, right? Happened there.
Yeah, it's almost like that your competitors are going to buy that out eventually. So I'm going to invest early and then try to rake our competitors over the coal and take some money while I'm at it.
Yep.
Another option.
Very cool.
All right. Cookie time.
Now what starts with the letter C?
Apple has had a lot of 0 days this year.
Yeah. Yeah, these are ones in WebKit, ones in security framework. Are they bad, though? That's the thing. I mean, there's a whole new OS release, and that might indicate it's bad. Update your phones, kids.
Yeah, especially when Apple tells you to. Just have the automatic update. Let it update when you're sleeping. Not a big deal. A few days later, yeah, they talk about Google's security update, the Chrome 0 day, that basically it was all browsers that were affected. It's very interesting that it gets pushed to Chrome. It's like it's a Chrome 0 day. It's like, no, all browsers were affected by that one. Right? Like,
yeah, well, yeah, so many browsers are based on the same technology.
Yeah, but like Chrome gets the slap on the wrist, I guess.
Yep, you're the most famous.
Yeah, but yeah,
okay, all right.
It's just an interesting one. Make sure to update your iPhones. That's all.
And then Kubernetes. The last few Kubernetes vulnerabilities have been Windows related.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So basically, you could put a file on your Windows node, create a container, mount the file in, and then execute that file. And that file would use the container then to go and pull the information, because it would have elevated privileges. So basically, like the file itself that you mount in and run would give the container on the node elevated privileges, and then use that to then query Kubernetes for more information.
Oh, wow. Weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you want to look at the example, so if you go to the bottom, there's a provided proof of concept YAML, which is pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Click on that one.
I just did, yeah.
And then if you go to the win test, you'll see that it's basically calling for the Windows node specifically. It's pulling from the host path, and then it's starting that process. So it's going in and then like running whatever you put into that file.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so that file can have like a kubectl exec or whatever it is. It basically uses the pod's authentication and security in order to go and pull more information. Why
is that? Okay. Yeah.
There's a video if you want to see how it works. I think what it uses like the nodes access authentication with Kubernetes. So it doesn't use, maybe it doesn't use the pod, but it uses the nodes.
Oh yeah.
Elevated privileges with Kubernetes API.
Nobody ever expects you to be using that. So
yeah,
unless you've already broken out of the container.
Yeah, that was my take. But Windows node vulnerability, it's been patched. It was patched extremely quickly in August. Just a heads up if you're one of the very few people running Windows nodes with Kubernetes.
The very few, the select few.
Yeah, the privileged few. Privilege for headaches. Yeah. All right, are you ready? We talked about Winglang, and now it's time for tool time.
Does everybody know what time it is?
Steve, you brought up Winglang a while ago, and now you've gotten hands-on with it, right?
I kind of have. I had some conversations with some old friends who were very keen. You know, Bridge Crew is originally started in Terraform and analysis and the generation of infrastructure as code. So anytime something new that does this comes out of nowhere, it's like, oh, okay, what's this? And then one thing leads to another. I ended up talking to some of the founders at Winglang, who it turns out also wrote the AWS CDK. So fairly solid pedigree in creating dynamic or Turing complete infrastructure as code models like Pulumi, et cetera, right? Mm-hmm. And then I just started fiddling with it. So why don't we share me up here, and I'll give you my take on it.
Done. Programming language for the cloud, yeah.
So this is their tagline, which it's okay. Like there's a lot of these, so it doesn't immediately tell me what's going on. But the real differentiator, which is in tiny text down here, combining infrastructure and runtime code in one language, and it's like, so Pulumi could probably say the same thing confusingly, but what it does is it allows you to create inline logical serverless functions that get generated via a compiler. So and also it's easier to show you than to describe it. So if you're really heavily into serverless and you like infrastructure as code, and for you these are two separate processes, then, and if you like things being somewhat cloud independent so that you can run something based on your cloud destination, but maybe have caveats or logic inside your own infrastructure as code that says, well, if this is going to Azure, then do this. If it's going to here, do this more AWS specific thing, but it'll all be one code base. This kind of does all that for you. This is a lovely little website. I probably, like yourself, almost always go straight to the GitHub to see that. And there we go. Look at that. The last check-in. That's CEO Alad. Alad, who I was talking to him, he got, remember, did you see a Burning Man got rained out and then everyone got trapped?
Mm-hmm.
He was there. He was there. I was supposed to talk to him about this project because I was quite curious about it, and he just couldn't talk because he was trapped in. What he said was, you ever get stuck somewhere? He said best ever, because he's like, everyone got stuck and they all came together in community and blah blah blah. Right? Yeah. So yeah, it ended up being pretty good. So new open source programming language, worth mentioning, all open source. That's super cool. Mm-hmm. Cloud oriented. I think it's a very interesting concept of combining infrastructure and application without, so far as I can tell, screwing it up, but also not the full capabilities as you would get from a programmatic language, right? But it's pretty cool. In terms of, there you go, Elad Ben Israel behind the AWS CDK. No surprise, he's from Israel. Odd. I'm going to zip over and just jump straight to the basics. Which direction? Let's go this way. All right. So we have got, where am I going here? The installation's super easy. You need Node because it's all written in that.
Okay.
So if you don't like that, then you're kind of stuck. It's you just do a node install -g, and you can just say Winglang. I already installed it. I might do an update or just say up -g Winglang. A Winglang. Nice work, Steve. Let's make sure I'm on the current one, because I like when Bridgecrew first started, they seemed to churn out versions every 2 seconds. Okay, 3, 4. All right, I was lower than that, so I have upgraded something. And then from there, you have to just kind of start looking at examples like what you said. An easy example would be if I just do make their wing stuff. And there's a bunch of examples out there. I think the simplest one is just like, let's do an S3 bucket and stick some stuff in it. It kind of does a very, I don't call it by wing dot. They have their own extension .w.
Yeah, W.
Yeah, I call it main.w. That's a little bit more programmatic. It's a good example. I just pasted off of one of their examples. It's just like, so I've had a few conversations about this, the format, and some people have said they're like, because you can see it's kind of in Node. If you're not familiar with Node formats,
yeah,
you kind of need to be familiar with it, because it does follow some of those conventions. So you bring cloud, then you say let bucket equals new cloud bucket. So you can see, all right, so the cloud has a series of conventions already, which is kind of cool. And if I do this, let's just close that. You have code over here. See, what of my 27 screens is going to bring VS Code up? That, it never works, right?
Yeah, that same thing happens to me.
Yeah.
So when you say bring cloud, does it know which cloud, or do you have to set like a configuration file?
No, it's generic. It's generic at the moment. This is really
okay.
Small. So just so you know, there is a Wing language support. Just go get it. I highly recommend it, because without doing that, you kind of don't know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do, let's say, let bucket 2 new cloud dot bucket API counter function on deploy. So you get This,
All
I
the
think, for me
options.
is absolutely essential
Yeah.
to get the plugin. Because without it, all you're doing is churning through documentation. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is like, what are these new objects? What do they do? You can see they've got a bucket. They've created a counter just for fun, and they created a queue. So then what this does, what I find really cool about this is what this does is this is telling the cloud, build some stuff for me. And you're like, well, build what? I don't know. Like that's kind of where we are. So I have done barely anything. All I have is this one file that's going to create a queue. I didn't actually really go through the code in too much detail, but the inflate. So an inflate essentially means it's going to create a serverless function that does some stuff for me. Index, put a hello message in here and log it and create a file. That file is now going to be stored in the bucket. Boom. That's all it's going to do. So it's going to accept a message, store it as a file with the index as it increments. So a new file gets stored every time you send a message. Pretty straightforward, almost useless cloud application, but
Yeah.
good for demonstrating, right? The thing that kind of blew my mind was the next little bit was like, what drives me crazy, and you were in ops, right? So maybe this will resonate for you. And by the way, who knows where this is going to show up again? You say wing it, which I like because it's like, oh, let's see if it works. This is not going to put it in the cloud. Okay, I have to drag this over again. This, of course, it should have brought it up in this browser. Of course, it never brings it up in the browser that you're looking at. Yeah,
There's a default you can change in Chrome for that, but I'll let you get into it.
So this just launched.
Oh, interesting. That's why you need Node locally too.
Yeah. So now I've got the cloud bucket, the cloud counter, the cloud queue. There's no files in the bucket. You can look at the queue. You can say, oh, push a message. Hey, Mike. Bing. And then I can look at my bucket. Now I have a file. So it works.
Okay.
All this is running locally.
Interesting.
So I'm testing what I'm going to send to the cloud in this little environment. And I saw this, and I was like, oh, how good is this? But
yeah,
you know what I mean? Like once it gets more complicated, how crazy does this get? I haven't got there, but I think it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm going to need a few more use cases.
Right. And there are some that, people at home can play with. They have an examples directory. It's a little short right now, but if we looked at the how long they've been around, like usually when was the README created, kind of code of conduct 10 months ago. So this hasn't been going that long for the amount of for how far it's gone at the moment. There's one other little thing I'll show you. So I'm going to kill that off because I just wanted to show you how quite cool it is that you can test things locally. And they call it the map view, so you can go through the entire process. The deploy to AWS thing, they have a section which says how to do this. You do have to technically compile. So I'll show you two versions of that.
Okay.
So the same as I did earlier, I'm going to do a wing compile. See that I've got the target TF AWS. There's a simulator format. There's TF Azure, TF GCP, TF AWS. All the big three are there, and it will do it. There's also an environment variable that's automatically built into the code that is cloud, that gives you an environment variable that shows you what cloud you chose. That's how you can provide logic to say if this, then that, then this, based on cloud types. So there is some specific elements within the code that allow you to do that. But now I have a target directory. I found that was easier viewed here. So now I've got my TF AWS, my main TF.json.
Okay. Yeah, it takes it in and turns it into Terraform.
Yeah. I've got my pre-flight script. It's generated my code for me. So it's really, what it generates is pretty complicated.
Yeah.
I also found it fun because obviously the first thing I did was clicked on this. I realized the checkout started scanning it.
Yeah.
To go, oh, Terraform. How about
Yeah,
that?
that is a cool workflow. Because I was going to ask, what's the advantage of using something like this over Terraform? I think complexity is one of the biggest things, but there's also the downside of that, which you don't really understand what your files are creating in the cloud. So you need something like checkoff to make sure that, yeah, just because I create it in Winglang, like it might not be secure, it might be functional.
Yeah, and it's not perfect. It's got some advice on DynamoDB point in time recovery backup. That's an easy fix. Like we might even have fix using Copilot. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So there's a bunch of stuff by checkoff doesn't even know it did it. I'm glad we added that. So now I've got like a security workflow built in. They do have a really cool thing called compiler plugins, I believe it is, where maybe I can find that in the, which I think would be huge for security elements. Let's just go to the docs and show you that. I'm just getting started because it reminded me of targets. Essentially, it reminded me of admission controllers. So they have a pre and a post that you can implement, and so if you want to prepare your environment, compiler plugins, there we go. You have a pre-synth one that runs before it even runs the compiler. And I was like, okay, well, here's something where it puts something into a bucket. And I didn't quite understand why I would want that. There's a post-synth, which is like a mutating admission controller. Post-synth, you can run in there, and it gets past that Terraform we just looked at. And you can do things to it. Now, like all mutating admission controllers, I think this is a horrible idea. But nice that it's there because now you don't know what you're doing. Maybe I did think maybe what would be cool. I don't know if we ever demonstrated the open source thing we've got here called Your that adds traceability tags to Terraform resources.
I think we did.
Yeah,
like
that would be but that would be an awesome post-synth function hook. Because in addition to generating the Terraform, to have traceability tagging automatically posted in there, I think would be pretty sweet. So I'm going to take this away and probably we're going to look at whether we can do that. And then, of course, validate hook. Probably could find a way to run checkoff actually as a validate hook rather than in the browser. And then, boom, you're good, right? So I thought all of that looks pretty cool. And then after that, once you've done the generation, you can basically just do a Terraform init, Terraform apply of the target directory, and it goes, okay, boom, it's up and it's running. One of the advantages you asked, and I'll show you that over here, and also showcase the playground, which I really like. So Winglang IO/playground, just click here. And it starts you off with a not quite as simple as what I just did. Oh, no, sorry, not quite as advanced, and yet what I did was super simple. It gives you a hello world. And then within the playground, you can click on the AWS Terraform, the GCP Terraform, the Azure, whatever you want, and actually look at what it made and go, okay, so it made the bucket, it made the IAM role for me, it made the IAM policy for me. S3 object, like you can see the Terraform. And at a glance, I'm like, I got all that Terraform just by saying, give me a bucket. Like it didn't forget any of the least privilege elements that got generated. So that is like, well, I don't know if it's perfect yet. Of course, it probably isn't. I like the fact that it's attempting to generate, and if you have network requirements, it generates like VPC least privileges, IAM least privileges. They have, because they're the CDK guys, particularly within AWS, they've got a very good notion of what the minimal access required is. And that's the Terraform you create. So I thought it's a really interesting way of generating probably what might be more secure default Terraform than you would normally get on your own.
Yeah, that's a good point.
After that, though, any questions on what I've said so far? We're almost at the top of the hour. That's what I've got so far on it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, especially for people who are just getting into Terraform to test out and see how that all maps. I remember having to read through 1,000 docs to get Terraform running, and now you can chat GPT/Winglang it and get all this stuff pre-populated. So it's a lot easier to get started. I am curious about scale, the biggest buzzword ever. Yeah, what does that look like when you start creating massive amounts of blocks? This is very useful, I'd assume, for like a web application where you have sort of a couple things that are moving around. You might have a bucket, a database, a front end. You want to set it all up in the cloud. That I think is probably the easiest use case to get started with. Right?
It is pretty much right. If you throw my screen back up for 2 seconds, if you go to the examples, you'll see that they've got generic. The examples are not much more than we just said. Basic API auth, server-side rendered HTML, Redis backend, S3 backend, and then some hello worlds. Kind of like there's nothing nothing to answer your question there yet.
Yeah,
but it's interesting. It's interesting that your brain starts thinking about the potential, but at the same time, even when you saw the visual, I'm like, oh, what does that look like? Even getting a medium level application.
Yeah, what's the value add versus me just getting used to Terraform and getting or using Ansible and using them together? Like, is it more powerful? Is it just easier to use? There's that story hasn't quite been fleshed out when I look at the product, but I need to dive deeper before I'd compliment or comment on it.
Yeah, it's a watch the space. It's pretty cool though.
Yeah, very cool. What was the product that we're going to try to do in 2 weeks from now? What was it again? It was on
Nuclei, and it's whatever, risk assessor.
Yeah, Open Risk.
Open Risk
by Nuclei. 2 weeks from now on Friday, either me, Steve, or a guest will try to do it. But if not, just follow along. All the links are in the description. You'll see what we get up to. All right. Until then, thanks for joining the show, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take care.